Now, right out of the gate, I'm sure all of you want me to comment on what's going on with the Democratic debates right now, or frankly, the litany of other things going on in the world. Certainly, there's enough material out there just in the past month to make 100 episodes. I won't dispute that. But the truth is, I don't think it's important that I say much about some of these current events just yet. I certainly have a lot of opinions about what's going on in North Korea, Russia, Iran, among many other subjects. And I certainly have U.S. political candidates that I'm rooting for over others, and a lot to say about all of them. But I think for the first few episodes, it's important to kind of establish a baseline here. There are a few things we all need to get on the same page about before I can really start commenting on anything else. And don't worry, I do have a thing I will work in quick near the end regarding the Democratic debates, so stay tuned for that. But today's episode, or at least the majority of it, is actually going to be misconceptions about Americans and our patriotism. And this is a subject I definitely wanted to do early when I was conceiving of this podcast, channel, platform, whatever you call me talking to you right now. And in many ways, the goal of this episode will be to establish what it means to be an American in the first place. What truly are our strengths? Where did this strength come from? And understand that I really do have a lot of patriotism. I've always loved this country, but I don't think for the wrong reasons. But now I'm getting ahead of myself. So to start things off, I think the first point I want to touch on is actually the other side of this coin. The idea that Americans are either too patriotic or that we should... Or the perception that other countries hate America, because the fact is this really isn't true. Yet just upon Googling, Americans abroad, it's very easy to find all of these articles of anecdotal evidence, and it's always anecdotal or one-offs of, this couple does this terrible thing in Rome from America, or this one guy did this in Amsterdam, but it's never a study with a large pool of data, and that's what matters. And if you actually look up the polls that are out there, America is always charting in the top in terms of friendliness, in terms of, and I think this is a funny word to use, but I've seen polls where they try to take in which countries are the coolest nationality to be from. And America is always a chart topper. We're always in the top 10 or 20 out of hundreds of countries. And, well, you might say you're not number one every time, and that's certainly not true. But this idea that the world hates us has no factual basis. And I don't know why some camps in the U.S., whether it's late night talk show hosts or certain political groups act like that. It's just not true. Overall, other countries find us to be very friendly people that mean well. And I've certainly found that to be true in my own experience. In fact, just a few years ago, me and some friends kind of went on a dream vacation. We had saved up money for a while, and we decided, let's go on a road trip across Western Europe. We started in Scotland, and no, we didn't drive from Scotland to France, but we did fly from Scotland, Edinburgh to Amsterdam and hang out there and then rent a car. And we drove all the way through Belgium, through France, into the southern France, through the Alps, into northern Italy, through the west coast of Italy, to Rome, Siena. And the only thing we had is, we knew we had 3 weeks to be in Rome. And we just booked Airbnbs and did whatever we want along the way. Highly recommend it, by the way, guys. A plane ticket there, a plane ticket out, a car, some friends, and just time to spend driving wherever you want. In all of these countries, I didn't find these people that hated Americans. Anywhere. Northern France, Paris, Belgium, they didn't exist. And I think some of that is just the fact that most people are good and friendly on Earth. But you just got to get away from this idea, right? If you think, for instance, this is a cliche, that going to France as an American is going to get you a bunch of angry looks, I didn't see those angry looks. In fact, when we were in Amsterdam, we were actually realized before we left it was going to be during the 4th of July. So we were like, well, wait, we usually do something fun on the 4th of July. We're going to be in another country. What should we do? And we bought these USA red, white, and blue socks, the ones on the photo for this. And we wore them. You know, when we were in Amsterdam, we rented bikes like everyone has there and rode around to all of the sites, both within the city and out just outside of it. And we were riding those bikes with those big USA socks on during the 4th of July. And no one sneered at us. Everyone, there's actually several groups of Dutch people that when they saw us, both next to us and when they were riding bikes next to us, put their fists up in the air and went, USA, USA. And they just did that happily. They congratulated us. They're like, hey, happy 4th of July. You're an American. So again, you know, this idea that people hate Americans, it's just not there. And as you can tell from this story, I'm pretty proud to be an American for sure. But, you know, I'm sure there were some people, even if I didn't see them, that thought we were being overly patriotic. And this gets me to point number 2. Misunderstandings about patriotism. And the fact of the matter is, the point I want to make is that American patriotism, there's really a uniqueness to it. For instance, if you're waving a Russian flag, and I'm not saying you can't, I actually love when all countries are proud of where they come from. It's fun, right? An overarching assumption that when you wave a Russian flag, you're to a certain degree cheering for the Russian ethnicity. Most people in Russia are white, very white, much more so than in the US. And if you wave a Russian flag, I think the assumption is Russians are the best. But Russians doesn't just mean the land. It means the people that have been there for thousands of years. Same as if you're, waving a Chinese flag on the Chinese New Year, there is this inference you make where it's like, well, they're saying they're proud to be ethnically Chinese, not just from that patch of land. And when you wave an American flag, I think some people think there is a celebration of, I don't know, whiteness. I think that's what a lot of people, especially on the left in this country, think you're doing. You're cheering on white America. But the fact of the matter is that's just not true. The American flag represents 50 states, and these states are made up of people that come from all over the world. Despite even what some people like Richard Spencer may tell you, it represents people of all ethnicities. And that's where America almost isn't a country, if you ask me. It's kind of an idea, isn't it? This mindset that this experiment, and it is, trust me, still an experiment, works. Anyone can wave an American flag. Perhaps that's why those people in the Netherlands cheered for us. They got it. That we're just cheering for freedom in general. America isn't an ethnicity. It's an idea. At least that's where my patriotism for this country comes from. The idea that freedom can be a country. At least I certainly hope it stays that way. Now, I actually do want to talk about what does make America strong. I'd say once every other month, me and a few friends, we'll just fly to some city in the United States that we haven't been to before and kind of just hit the bars and the local sites, When we went to Portland, Oregon, we checked out the forests, of course. When we went to Austin, Texas, we looked at the state capitol. We got some good Tex-Mex. When we went to New Orleans, we checked out the Old Town, the French Quarter. And man, did some serious bar hopping. But recently I was in Portland, Maine. And again, we enjoyed it. There were a lot of breweries in the area. We went on a boat to a couple of islands, enjoyed some lobster. And on the flight out, one of my friends said, isn't it so different, though? It's crazy to think, we were kind of reminiscing on all the places we went. Oregon, California, New Orleans in Louisiana, Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois. These all feel like different countries. Isn't it crazy? And I said, they are different countries. And we can't forget that point. America's competitive advantage is that we are individualistic, smaller countries that are easy to travel between. This allows for an immense amount of interstate competition. And what happens is these companies are founded in various states. They battle each other out, and the winners compete overseas. That's why you keep seeing so many American companies do so well. Or at least I think that's why. And you've seen this in other countries. The United Kingdom. I think it can't be overlooked that the UK was several smaller kingdoms that united before a lot of other European states did, and that gave them a huge advantage. But they're getting into more problems now, aren't they? And I think it's because of the homogenization, because of the an attempt to unify every little thing, to make every little thing the same at the federal level. America is strong not just because we're so bloody big, but because we're big and our locations are distinct. They challenge each other. Now, certainly we have to have some rules that are all the same, right? Like we all decided a long time ago that if you stab someone, that's not good, that maybe you shouldn't go double the speed limit, and you probably shouldn't be drinking while you do it. I guess Mississippi doesn't care if you drink, huh? These types of things are necessary. But we can't forget that our diversity, and not ethnicity, right? But diversity of cultures, even at the state level, is what makes us so strong. It really is this everlasting individualism that I think is where our patriotism comes from so powerfully. I mean, really think about it. If you look at like some figures in French history, like General Joffre in World War I, he was a national icon for basically, frankly, doing the French stereotypes best. Big, fancy meals, boisterous activity. He liked women. He liked cheese and wine. And he did it the best. So he became a national figure for being the most French. But on the contrary, American patriotism stems from the rejection of nationalism. We're so excited to be American because we succeeded in not being French, in not being English, and not being Russian. That's where the American patriotism comes from, to those who wonder. Both abroad and internally, both to maybe someone in Europe who doesn't get why we're so proud to be American, or maybe someone in the U.S. who's a political commentator that doesn't get, and a lot of them come to the U.S. and from England, for instance, to become commentators and then go, I don't get why Americans are just so damn proud. And that's why we're proud. We're proud to not be English. We did it. We're not English or French. We're just survivors. And I really want to run with that thread there, because contrary to what I just said, too, it's counterintuitive what I'm about to say. But in fact, there is a common bloodline amongst all Americans, despite us rejecting the idea that we all have to be the same bloodline. Think about it. Whether you were an English reject sent to the colonies in the 1600s, a slave forced to survive a horrendous capture, boat ride, and survival through the antebellum South, or right now, if you're a Syrian fleeing a war-torn region, maybe someone fleeing Honduras, the rampant gang crime in your country. Everyone who is in America came here through hardship. That is our bloodline. I know, for instance, that at least on my mother's side, her great-grandfather came to this country, to Minnesota, when he was 14, on his own, with almost no money in his pocket. That's who I'm a descendant of. Almost everyone, then, is a descendant of the greatest survivors, and that's probably also where our stubborn patriotism comes from. Not just the knowledge we're not French, we're not English, and we give you the finger if you try to make us listen to you. But that we quite literally, on average, are people that rejected the norms and decided to try for something greater. I mean, when I was in Italy, actually, in La Spezia on the western coast, I remember talking to one family, and they said quite literally, we've lived in this stone structure on a hill for the past 3,000 years. You know, we run this restaurant here, and my grandfather ran it, his great-grandfather ran it, and his great-grandfather ran it. It survived everything. It survived the fall of the Roman Empire, the plague, and that's cool, right? That is interesting. That's definitely commendable history there. But the people from La Spezia 100 years ago who came to the U.S. with those huddled masses, they decided that they would try for something even greater. And I don't think we just can't forget that in this country, that we actually are all linked by our rugged individualism and the knowledge that all of us chose, at least strived for something greater. It's what it means to be an American. And that's why some of us are so patriotic. Now, before I let you go, one more thing. I do want to talk about the notion that Andrew Yang, a Democratic candidate, may have had his mic turned off during the second debate. And I'm trying to tiptoe around eggshells here. This isn't a pro or anti-Democrat thing. I'm just going to assess this situation objectively. In the clips available online, to me, it is clear that his mic was off a few times. It's abundantly clear. You can see it. You can see Biden look at him while he's talking, and nothing is coming out of the speakers. At least from what we know, it's clear his voice was not transmitted. He's not lying. What's most concerning to me, then, is that NBC fully refutes his mic was ever turned off, at least last time I checked. And it was, guys. So I'm concerned that we didn't hear NBC eventually say we're sorry. At least, again, not at the time of this recording. You know, why lie about that? Or why not fact check his claim? Especially when there's such clear evidence out there. Concerning. And that brings me to a final point I want to make here. Again, trying to be as objective as I can be. There's absolutely no doubt that at certain points of 2016, the Democratic machine did work against Bernie Sanders behind the scenes when they thought his support was getting out of control. I encourage people to not turn this off right away. I'm not some Bernie bro. I'm just saying it's out there. We have the emails and the information. I'm certainly no fan of what transpired to get those emails, but they were real. And there's been other recordings that back this up. At first, Bernie was ignored by the Democratic leadership because they didn't think he would last, that he was just some gimmick. But he did last. So eventually they did work against him with super delegates and other little ways they could put their finger on the scale just to make it that little bit harder to win in a very close primary. Little differences matter when things are so close. Now, there's no way to know for sure if Bernie Sanders would have defeated Trump in 2016, not unless you have a crystal ball as some kind of alternative reality traveling machine like in Rick and Morty. I don't know. That's the only way to know for sure. But what we do know is a few things. 2016 was a painfully close election. Painfully close. Any little thing could have tipped the scale towards the Democrats. Maybe if Comey wouldn't have reopened the investigation out of nowhere. Maybe if Hillary would have never said her deplorable statement. Or perhaps if none of those health concerns would have popped up and taken imagination of people. I'm not saying that those subjects were fair to talk about or highlight, but I am saying they happened. and they did hurt Hillary's chances. Second, Trump easily won the Republican nomination, so he is always going to be the one the Democrats would have had to have defeated in 2016. He's the constant in our attempting to be scientific discussion. So if Trump's the constant, and the election was close, and there were a few things that if any one of them wouldn't have happened, Hillary may have won, well, then I guess we can take that information and say a couple other things. None of those scandals would have happened to Bernie. Now, I don't know if he would have had his own scandals. Well, he's running right now, and he doesn't seem to have any, so I guess we'll see. But I think it isn't crazy to suggest he wouldn't have had any scandals at the level Hillary did near the end of the campaign. Furthermore, Bernie did consistently poll higher, consistently, in all polls against Trump among independents, and that's where Hillary really lost a lot of people. So, it really isn't crazy to think that perhaps if the scales were tipped a little less, Bernie would have won, and perhaps he would have defeated Trump. Perhaps. Again, not saying we know for sure. With this information, though, you would think the takeaway of the Democratic leadership may have been that they made a mistake tipping these scales, right? Maybe they should have just let history play itself out and the best candidate would have emerged. But I'm worried that their takeaway actually was that they failed to sabotage him early enough. At least that's what I worry they concluded when I see Andrew Yang's mic turned off. Yang is the new dark horse, with a groundswell of widespread and organic support. I'm not accusing anyone of anything because I legitimately do not think there is sufficient evidence that anything was done to Yang on purpose. I really don't. But I do want to say to the leadership of really both parties, if you do this to any dark horse, you're increasing your chances of losing. The best candidate is always the one who emerges on top, fair and square. Tipping the scales towards the one you want to win is self-sabotage at the end of the day. Flyover States, political views across the U.S. is brought to you by me, Tom, of Moore's Law is Dead and Flyover States. If you like my content, please consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find Flyover States there, and there will be a link in the description. I don't have any fancy tiers or goals, just the assumption that if you like my content, you'll pay me for what it's worth. That's all it's there for. It really does go a long way.